It's nice to see everybody, and like our first Zoom planning and highways meeting. So welcome everybody, and we'll proceed with the agenda, as we have no public participation tonight. So apologies for absence.
I haven't received any apologies, Madam.
No. Item 2 on the agenda, disclosure of interests. To deal with any disclosure of members of disclosure of pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act in relation to matters on the agenda. Well, I think we need to all give a non-pecuniary interest on the buyback call.
Yes. When I responded to Lewis a few months ago on the first application, I just added to the response that should be noted that the applicant is a member of the committee, but was not at the meeting when the application was discussed. I just added that as a proviso to the response that we made at that time. So when it comes to that application, I think it's at the end of the list, I'll make that proviso again to any response we make, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Councillor Hanneman.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Are we using the chat in any capacity, or the share screen in any capacity tonight? I don't know if you or Jeff had that in mind, or we're not really going to use it, or just as an etiquette really before we get going. I just thought I'd throw that one in. Thank you.
Well, it's just that there's no public, so I think we can just carry on with the agenda instead of reading all the house rules and everything. Yeah, it's all right with the committee. Yeah, Councillor Meek.
I don't know whether I'm supposed to register this, but the 10 Blatchington Hill application, there has been, as Jeff will know, and Linda, probably you do as well, I think you were included in my email for that, there's been ongoing problems with disturbance out of hours working, and I actually went round to the property on one morning when neighbours were complaining to me via email about it, and confronted the builders and the developer, who is the owner, subsequent to which there was a complaint made against me by the owner as a Seaford Town Councillor in the way I conducted myself, and there has since been an investigation about me by the monitoring officer at LDC, the result of which is that I was exonerated, but I don't know, I presume I should mention that.
Yes, I think through you, Madam, as far as I think it's probably wise, as you've been so closely involved with what's been going on there as local resident and local member, it's probably best if in this situation you don't speak or vote. I'm not that I'm trying to it does sound a bit draconian, but in view of what's gone on, the applicant could say, well, that member has already made up his mind about my application through his actions. I mean, as I say, you've been exonerated. The actions were found to be, well, not actionable as far as the monitoring officer is concerned. But in order to sort of stop any criticism from the applicant to whatever response we make, it's probably best, and as I say, it's subject to what the chairman and other members might think, probably best if you were to not take part in the discussions on either of those two applications because of previous events. As I say, I'm not trying to gag you, I'm just thinking that will probably, it'll make the decision stronger because the applicant won't be able to undermine those decisions by referring to your sort of previous involvement, if you follow my drift.
Yeah.
Is that?
Can I speak, Madam Chair?
Yes, certainly.
I take that point absolutely, but the reason I went round there wasn't because of the applications themselves. It was because of noise out of hours, which neighbours were complaining about. In other words, before 8 o'clock in the morning and after 6 at night. So I don't know if that makes any difference, but it was actually the complaints by the residents were actually directed at out of hours working, not against the actual planning application itself, although they do object to that.
The compromise could be, again through you, Madam,
Yes.
for Councillor Meek, because of his previous involvement, to speak on the item but not to vote.
That's where I was going to come from.
Yeah.
Councillor Meek, you know, wants to join in the debate, but don't actually vote on it. And and also it's how Councillor Meek feels comfortable if he does want to, you know, join the debate on that property.
Okay, thank you. I accept that. Thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other disclosure of interest? None? Item 3, public participation, there's none.
Thank you.
So we move on to planning applications received week commencing the 5th July. The first one is LW/20/0426, 12 Kingsmead, and it's single story rear extension for Mr. J. Liptrot. So open to the committee, to Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this one's fairly straightforward. So yes, I'm quite happy with the application.
Right, thank you. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Borman. And can I have show of hands of supporting this application? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
LW/20/0431, 45 Bell Road. And this is the erection of front boundary wall with railings for Mr. J. Mallion. Open to committee. Councillor Edson.
Yeah. On his application, he says how it's mixed along that part of Fell Road. But when you look on the Google Earth around that house, nearly almost as far as the eye can see, all the boundaries are hedges. So personally, I think that they should stay as hedges. He's got 2 gates. I just don't see why.
Have you actually been up along Fell Road?
No, not recently, but I have been along there.
It can be out of date by
It could be.
years.
Yeah, that's true.
So
But,
you can't take that as sort of read.
Well, I was up there.
Yeah.
a fortnight
Okay,
ago.
thank you. Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. I think I read on somewhere that some of the hedges are gone, so they've been cut down anyway. So obviously, sometimes when people say they've got a wall, there's often a hedge with it, isn't there, or vice versa sometimes, or fences has a. Often it's shrubs which turn into hedges, isn't it?
Yes.
So because obviously over the years they do sort of merge into each other. So I don't think there's any rules if anyone wants to cut a hedge down, unless hedges don't get listed like trees, do they? In that sense. So,
No.
thank you.
Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, thank you. I think sometimes people with those hedges don't cut them often enough, so they do start to look unsightly along the road. And they are obviously large properties down that road. And I actually think, well, what they're changing it to and the styling, and that it would actually improve the house and the area as well. So I'd like to support the application. That's what I propose.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Argent, thank you. The only comment I would say on this one, I think it'd be nice if they pick up on the flint walls in the area. There are, you know, quite a number of flint walls, which is the character of the area and of Seaford as a whole. And I did notice on the plan there was sort of an oblong piece in the middle of the brickwork, and if that could be flint, I think that would make the wall quite attractive. I don't know how your feelings on that would be, if we can include that on support, supporting the application.
It is an area of established character in the neighbourhood plan and the local plan, so it's sort of the level below conservation area. So it's, I think if you supported that, it'd be justified. Where you wouldn't normally suggest that sort of thing for an undesignated residential area, but this has got this this designation in the neighbourhood plan, so it does, it is justified.
Councillor Edson?
Yeah. Isn't it part of the conservation area along Pearl Road?
No.
No.
It says character under the neighbourhood plan, isn't it?
So some of Pearl Road, where Blatchington Hill is, and around there, is conservation area.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go very far up Pearl Road.
No.
The rest of Pearl Road up to 93, where the other application is for, that's the edge of the area of established character, number 93, just before the golf club.
Yeah. Yeah. I did look on that one to see if it was part of the conservation area, and it isn't.
It's only just outside.
Yeah, only just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a recommendation supporting this application and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4 in favour.
Yeah. And those against?
Well, that's carried.
Against. Thank you. LW/20/0420, 23 Downsview Road, installation of 2 air conditioning units to the rear south facing elevation. To the committee. Who would like to lead on? Councillor Edson? Sorry.
Yeah, my only problem with that is the noise from those units. In the application it says low noise unit.
Yeah,
but I don't know if anyone has any experience of this sort of thing.
I did sort of look. That was one of my concerns as well, and I did read about it on the application. And apparently, when you're standing a metre away, it's no more than people talking or rainfall.
Oh, I see.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hunneman next, and then Councillor Meek. Councillor Hunneman.
Thank you, good chair. Yes, I think I mean my experience is being in an apartment somewhere down in Marbella. When it's 35 degrees and 25 at night, and you have the air conditioning on at night. So I don't know if the intended use is for the night time or on the daytime. I mean, obviously it's quieter at night, so that could be an issue. But there's no residents. She said, the applicant said that they've approached the residents, neighbours, haven't they?
Yeah.
And there's we haven't got any feedback from that, have we? So as far as I know. No. So in light of that, I would support it, but there's still a little bit of proviso when they're going to use the actual aircon, but that's out of our control, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you could suggest a condition if you want to.
But is it? What would you think? We don't get that hot at night, do we? So much here, but I mean, I don't know.
Might be this weekend.
Yeah, probably the one weekend.
Councillor Meek.
Yeah, I would object to this application absolutely, totally and completely, because I think it's completely unnecessary. and as a chair of the Climate Change Working Party, I think there are other things that could be done to that property to mitigate against heat increment during the day. For instance, if you put extra insulation in the roof or in the walls, the house won't get so hot in the first place. You can put sunscreens down. There's windows that you can use to defray solar gain. So I think, as opposed to putting in some things which A, look ugly, and B, use electricity to defray those kind of heat gains, I think you should be using other mitigations, which also, if you put insulation in the roof, you actually insulate in the winter. What they're complaining about is solar gain on a south-facing side of a house in the day. So I think there are ways that you can mitigate against that, and I wouldn't support this application on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Anybody else like to comment on this application? Well, I've got on the table a proposal from Councillor Honeyman to support this application. Does that find a seconder?
Can I just come back?
Yes.
I think it would have to. I'd only support it if we knew when they're going to be using it. If we don't really know, do we? I mean, it's no.
Well, if you're concerned about it being used at night, you can just suggest that, you know, it's not used after, say, 10 o'clock at night or something like that.
Like 10 to 8, something like that. 8 in the morning, or
yeah. Because it's, you know, they're well known to cause a low sort of ambient noise. I don't think it's an overreaction, so, you know, if you wanted to suggest that as part of your proposal, there'd be nothing wrong with that.
No, that'd be the only way I'd agree to it if it was used in daytime only.
Okay. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, I'd actually like to second Councillor Meek's proposal, as long as we can find something justifiable to reject it, because I do agree with him that this country isn't that hot all the time. You might get a couple of days a year. They do not need two, not just one, but two units. So as long as we can find some justifiable grounds to reject it, I would actually second Councillor Meek's proposal.
Yeah, I've got to find a seconder for Councillor Honeyman's supporting this application. If that doesn't find a seconder, then we can go to Councillor Meek. Does anybody want to second Councillor Honeyman's? No? So that falls. So we go to Councillor Meek, and he is rejecting this application. And we need, you know, some grounds on what to reject it on. So over to you, Councillor Meek. If you can repeat some of the things that...
I would reject it on the grounds that alternative, more sustainable alternatives could be found which would benefit the premises more and wouldn't impinge on the neighbours and wouldn't be unsightly and are much more better alternatives going forward with the climate change crisis facing us.
Must agree with you, because I've just had my roof done inside and out, and I've noticed the difference both in the winter and during these hot. And the back of my bungalow is nearly all glass, so you just put the blinds across and it stays quite cool. So yes, I agree with you there.
and they, would you want to add that they sort of spoil the appearance of the front of the building, or they're
at the back?
They're sort of unattractive additions to the appearance of the building as well, just as a secondary. Yeah. I mean, I think on policy grounds is not the strongest decision, but it makes a point, and if members want to make that point to Lewis, then they should go ahead. I think at some time in the future there might be a specific policy aimed at against air conditioning units on the grounds of climate change, etc. But as it stands at the moment, the policies in favour of climate change matters are are not quite strong. They're more general, aren't they? But I don't think there's anything wrong if members are thinking that way of making that point to Lewis. What they do with it is another matter. But then, they might agree, and they might make the.
If Lewis, do support this application, could we put in what Councillor Hunneman said about time restrictions?
Yeah.
Would that be agreeable to you, Councillor Meek, as your?
Yeah, yes, I couldn't object to that if Lewis decided to go with it. But I was just going to come back, if I may, Chair, to what Jeff was saying. I think protocols, I can't remember what you described it as, but going forward, I think the climate situation is very much in favour of much more insulation, which protects against heat as well as retains warmth. So I'd kind of slightly disagree that I think protocols going forward are very driven towards more insulation of properties, which benefit the summer and winter.
Thank you. Councillor Hunneman?
Yes, thank you quickly for coming back. Yes, I sort of go with Councillor Meek in a way, but it's almost as though they haven't, the applicant hasn't really told us what they've already done, or alternatives, have they really? If I couldn't see it anyway, in the sense of, have they put blinds in, have they tried this, that and the other? I don't think they have they? So
it's not mentioned. I didn't see it anyway.
I know it's almost as though if it was, you almost sort of see them more in an urban setting when they're, flats. And like I was mentioned earlier when I first talked about when you sort of, when you often go to more hotter climes. It's more the urban side. They seem to be more acceptable. I don't know if anyone agree with that, or in holidays or areas, but in a fairly rural location, it's going to be one of the exception of the rule, isn't it? But anyway.
Okay, so we can go to the vote of rejecting this application. Can I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favour of objection.
And those against? And those who abstain? Okay, that's carried.
2 abstentions.
Carried. Welcome, Councillor Ebden. I can't take your vote as you came halfway through the debate, but welcome to the meeting. And
thanks. I was just putting my hand up there to say I didn't vote because I didn't take part in it. But I just wanted to say I've spent 20 minutes trying to get into the meeting, so that's why I'm late. So apologies.
Okay. Well, welcome to the meeting. We now move on to LW/20/0382, 10 Blatchington Hill, creation of a new basement. Open to the committee. Who would like to lead on this?
Could I, Chair? Could I ask? Would it be in order that Jeff could just maybe explain a bit about this situation, because he knows that the right way to talk about it, and I think you know the history, Jeff.
Yes, it's a difficult one. I've explained it to Councillor Meek over the last few weeks. Work's been going on here for quite a few weeks in excavation of this basement. As soon as it started, it was referred to Lewes District Council for enforcement action, but work's carried on. The trees have been taken out to facilitate the excavation of the basement. The applicant was obviously contacted by Lewis and has been persuaded to put in a retrospective application. The problem is it hasn't led to a stopping of the work. The work's carried on, sometimes starting at 7 o'clock in the morning with excavators, and noise and disturbance and dust causing problems to local residents. Local residents have been up in arms about it and have been continuing to send emails to Lewes Enforcement. I haven't really had, I'm assuming Lewes Enforcement put pressure on the applicant to put the application in and has asked him to stop work, and has told him that the work that has been carried on is you know, it's his own risk, if you like. But he has carried on, and from what I understand, I mean, most of the work has been carried out. I turn to back to Councillor Meek because he's around the corner, but a large amount of the work of the excavation has been carried out. It's a basement underneath an existing large side extension, and there are a number of concerns. But the main point is that he's allowed to put a retrospective application in, and members cannot, in considering their response to that application, can't take into account the fact that most of the work has already been completed, because the law allows him to have a retrospective application considered as if the development hadn't started. Well, it's obviously not a satisfactory situation. It's almost impossible to actually make a proper response in those circumstances. But that's how the law stands. There have been several attempts in the past to make breaches of planning control like this illegal, but there's been no move to make breaches illegal. The breach of the law on matters like this comes after the local authority has served a notice requiring the person to stop or remedy the breach. And if they don't stop or remedy the breach within a certain number of months, then that becomes a criminal offence. But in this case, Lewis haven't served a notice on him. They've just told him that he must stop and put an application in. And what he's done is put an application in, but he hasn't actually stopped the work. And there are a number of issues, really. There's firstly the fact that's been raised by one of the residents that the basement that he's excavating is intended as additional accommodation below the existing large side extension, and that could make that side extension and basement, it could be turned into a separate dwelling at some time in the future and severed from the main property, which would be a concern on planning grounds. So that's one point. Another point is that a certain number of trees have been removed or destroyed by the excavations that have been carried out to facilitate the excavation of the basement. And the removal or felling or destruction of any tree in a conservation area without notice having been given to the local authority is a criminal offence. And here we've had at least 3 trees that have been removed that were along the front boundary and added to the character and appearance of the conservation area in that they screened the property. There's been no actual alterations to the property itself. So it's very difficult on planning grounds to argue that the property, alterations to the property have impinged on the character of the conservation area. But there are these issues of the removal of the trees, that if he had put a proper application in before he commenced works, then steps would have been taken to protect the trees as a condition. He could have been required to retain those trees rather than just send his excavators across them. He also could have been required to keep to a construction program specifying hours during which construction could take place. That's quite common in a development like this in a residential area, in which case he wouldn't have been starting at 7 o'clock. It would have been a specific breach of that condition, and specific action could have been taken against him, or at least there would have been a condition there restricting him. And also there could have been a condition, if he'd have put an application in the proper way, restricting the use of that side extension and basement to use in conjunction with the main property, rather than as a separate dwelling, because of just to deal with that point. Because he jumped the gun and started the excavation without putting an application in, then none of those points were properly considered as they should have been at the outset, and no conditions were applied, and he was able to go ahead and just do what he liked, basically. But it's very difficult to object to the application on planning grounds, but as far as those three issues which I've mentioned, which could have been dealt with by conditions, should be flagged up. Well, I suggested could be flagged up by members in their response. Certainly, there's grounds for saying that the destruction of the trees should be investigated, because that is the direct criminal offence. If you want to get rid of trees in a conservation area, you have to give 6 weeks notice to the local authority, and the local authority can then come back and decide whether the tree can be removed or felled, or whether it should be made the subject of a preservation order. That's because of the importance of trees in a conservation area. So, as I say, it could be said that the outset that the trees were vital to retain the character of the conservation area and should have been retained at all costs, and that the removal of the trees, is a criminal offence which should be followed up. But as far as direct planning objections to the development's concerned, then the grounds are not strong. But as I say, there are grounds for being critical of the applicant's actions, which can be passed on to Lewis. Hope that's clear.
Councillor Meek.
Thanks for that, Jeff. You said it much better than I could have. I'd like to remind members that I know that Jeff will say this too, that we're not allowed to consider the other applications that have been made, because I know that the application has to be considered on its own merits. But apparently this exact project application was rejected 3 years ago, where he actually applied for an underground car park, an underground garage underneath the two-storey extension, which he actually applied for and got planning permission for. And obviously what's happened is he's just decided, well, I'm going to build the garage anyway. So that's hence the basement. And he's actually building what was given planning permission, which is the two-storey extension above. The objection is to the basement, which was dug illegally because there was no planning permission for it. So personally, I feel that we should reference the fact that this was turned down before, and he's just applied now for and got planning permission for the two-storey extension, but's built the basement anyway, which was originally denied. So for me, I find that's an important historical thing to take into account, because he's basically just doing what he wants and ignoring planning regulations.
Thank you, Councillor. A question, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the depth they've had to dig for this basement, what about the archaeology side of it? Because I think it comes under the area, doesn't it?
It would be in the notification area, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. See, that's another condition that could have been added if he'd have gone about things the proper way.
Yeah.
Can I just say, Chair, that this is actually what a neighbour highlighted in his deposition to Lewes District Council, saying there was no opportunity for an archaeological dig. It's all been concreted over, or whatever might have been there has been dug up and thrown away. So that was raised by one of the neighbours.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who else would like to comment? Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you, Chair. We can't widen the discussion to the next application in any way. They're not linked, in quotes. No. I know we're dealing with, it's only because of the outbuilding is, one of the objects says a wall's been built, as though you might as well go right on the boundary now to number 10 from 3 Sherwood.
Deal with it as two separate applications.
Yeah, the two properties are linked, but the basement is is one application, and the 3 Sherwood Road will bring in aspects of 10 Bratchington Hill because of the way the properties are linked, but that's a separate issue.
So as a side issue, if you were speculating why the trees were cut down, is that more from access to get to the so-called garage, do you think? Yeah, go say. Yeah.
So the basement, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Councillor Meek can confirm it, but I think the trees were obviously taken out to make it easier to carry out the work.
I see, for the construction site, and also to do the basement anyway, even afterwards.
A holly tree mentioned, and a cherry tree,
right.
and a third tree. As I say,
there's one tree which might suffer damage because of the roots have been damaged or something.
Yeah. I mean, what you'd do, you'd have a condition specifying trees which needed to be protected, and they'd be required. They'd put a fence around the base of the tree to stop excavators compressing the earth around the tree and just destroying the roots, and eventually destroying the tree.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair. That helps. Thank you.
We'll swap round. Right. Any other comment? Anybody would like to comment more on this? Councillor Everton.
So are you advising, Jeff, that there isn't actually many grounds in which we can actually object to this, just based on the fact that it's been built, and it's just sort of periphery things about the trees and things like that are an issue? Because I just feel like, what's the point in planning laws if you can just do what you want anyway? I think it doesn't sit well.
I think we could say, if you wanted to, you could say that the removal of the trees, which to facilitate the development, has directly affected the character of the conservation area, and that in a way is an objection. But now the trees are gone, then really all the local authority can do is not to refuse the application on those grounds because the trees are no longer there, but to maybe initiate a prosecution for breach of the law regarding trees in conservation area. It's difficult to justify a refusal in a way because although, you can, I think what you can say is that if the application had been submitted in the proper way, then you would have asked for all these conditions that he's on matters that he's flouted to have been added, and but it doesn't really amount to a ground for refusal other than on the trees. You could say, well, that the removal of the trees has had such a serious effect on the conservation area that,
and also an adverse effect on the screening from the neighbours.
Yeah, that's the screening from the road and the neighbours. But given that the trees aren't there anymore, I mean,
it could be made to replace them.
Be difficult to justify.
You could add a condition that these trees should be replaced.
Yes.
Screening.
I know that previously we've highlighted work that's been done, or we've not permitted an application, but one of the things that we've highlighted is that it's very difficult once you allow one property owner to do work like this to then refuse that as planning permission for other properties. I know that we've highlighted that previously when we've sent things up to Lewis to say that it's not in keeping, and then it makes it so it's a possibility that something that's not in keeping can then be done in other properties in the street.
Yeah. I mean, can I ask if anybody is who wants to approve this application, although reluctantly, maybe. Does anybody want to approve it? If not, then we go for reject. Councillor Borman, do you want to speak?
Yeah, please. Councillor Meek mentioned earlier that there was a previous application for an underground car park, I think he said,
Yeah.
and that was rejected.
Yeah.
Was that
So obviously you've looked into it a lot more and gone back further than I have, but do you know why it was rejected and what the conditions were for that?
As far as I understood, but I may be wrong on this, I think it was on the grounds that Blatchington Hill's a very busy road, and to have someone turning off into an underground car park at that point was considered that it might be very dangerous from a highway's point of view, because cars go up and down that road quite fast. And even in fact, when the work's was done on that hill with a concrete pumping lorry there was lots of problems, and apparently there were about 2 near misses on that hill because of the concrete lorry being there when these illegal works were taking place. It's a busy road, and it's quite a dangerous road actually. So I think it was on grounds of access to the garage and the highways aspect of that, but I couldn't be sure about that.
You could also say it was an overdevelopment of the property to build out the basement like that. It's sort of too intensive a development on a single plot, and so that's another reason that you could put it. I think there are. If you want to object, I think you should, and then because there's quite a lot of points to refer to support.
That actually reminded me that was previously. I've remembered what it is now. We previously rejected on overdevelopment, and one of the things that you highlighted when you set it up was that it then sets the precedent where other properties similar to that in the street could also then overdevelop, because we've allowed one. But it becomes very difficult to close the door on these type of applications once someone's been permitted.
Yeah, you say it's not in the character of the other properties in the conservation area, or not in character with, or something like that. Yeah, because it is.
Councillor Meek.
Sorry, just an extra little bit of information. The house we're talking about is number 10, Blatchington Hill. The next house down the road from that is number 6, Blatchington Hill. So you could suggest that number 10 is almost a double plot, and it could be his intention to make number 8, Blatchington Hill, as a fill-in building there, you see. This is all supposition, I understand, and it's conjecture, but it's a very neat little bit of information that he's building an extension apparently and wanting a basement, but it could easily be another building, and it could be number 8 Blatchington Hill. I just give you that for information.
Thank you. I know the numbering in Blatchington Hill and Pearl Road are all a bit
very odd.
So if I can have a proposer that we reject this application, and then we'll go through the grounds on what to reject it on. Okay, so Councillor Borman, you're proposing to reject this application, and I've got Councillor Edson seconding. So if we can go through the grounds of rejection, which I think we've more than covered. Jeff's disappeared.
Jeff's left.
He's back.
He's gone away.
Andy's back. Andy's back, so I had to close the door. He was screaming up the stairs.
So if we reject say where Councillor Everton has mentioned about precedent and for other properties in the area.
Yeah.
And what else?
Dangerous access, overdevelopment of the plot, not in character with the conservation area. and a dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think we should also refer to, I think we should put in conditions, and also that we're very disappointed that this has been done, that the like the county archaeologists haven't, you know, didn't have a chance to view the site.
Hmm. Yeah, we got, and that if it had been submitted in the normal way, we could have suggested time conditions on the construction, a non-severance condition on the extension and basement,
Yeah.
to stop it, you know, to stop it being severed and turned into a separate dwelling,
Yeah.
and an archaeological condition, you know, requiring excavations to be allowed
Yes.
before the work commenced. That sort of, you know, so there was no opportunity to do those.
Yeah. And I think the to involve the tree officer in
And the trees, yeah, and to
you
to
know,
ask them to make an investigation with a view to prosecution.
what's that? Sorry.
Right. So
Okay.
yeah.
And yeah, and you've just mentioned the condition of the extension to remain as to the host building.
Yeah, I've got all those points.
Okay. So,
Mhm.
are you happy with that, Councillor Borman? Of those, yeah. And so, can I have a show of hands of rejecting the application on those grounds?
1, 2, 3, 4. That's unanimous with
Yeah.
Councillor Meek not
Thank
voting.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good debate. And we move on to planning applications received in the week commencing the 12th of July. And it's LW/20/04361 Sovereign Close. And this is the demolition of existing single-storey rear extension, replacement with a single-storey rear and two-storey side extension.
Sorry. Point of order, Chair. Can we go back to 3 Sherwood Road?
3 Sherwood Road?
Hmm.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Borman. That's because I was making the notes at the bottom of my page, sorry. Right, LW/20/0332 and 3 Sherwood Road, retention of outbuilding at the rear. So, yes, important application again. So open to the committee. Who would like to lead on this? Councillor Meek?
This is a situation that has history to it as well. Whether that's relevant, I'm not quite sure, but just to remind you that 3 Sherwood Road had a planning application for a change of roof line, which was passed, and the applicant then started doing work on 3 Sherwood Road, which during the process, local neighbours realised was being converted into 3 flats. And this was flagged up to LDC, who didn't actually do anything about it because they couldn't, because there wasn't an application for conversion to 3 flats. And as far as they were concerned, it wasn't being converted to 3 flats, even though building control was coming and inspecting it as a conversion for 3 flats. Anyway, that's past history. What's happened is that the whole of the garden of that property has been appropriated by 10 Blatchington Hill, and to all intents and purposes is now part of that garden because a historic flint wall was knocked down and the boundary line basically obliterated. The situation now is that that garden has disappeared under concrete, and there is now a building being built. It's still in the process of being built, which now spans, actually straddles the boundary line of the back of 3 Sherwood Road and 10 Blatchington Hill. I've got photographs which show this. Also, there were a lot of trees and shrubs were taken down at the back of 10 Blatchington Hill to make way for this ingression to the garden. What's extraordinary, and Jeff will explain this, I'm sure, he's asked for retention of a building, which when he applied for it, there wasn't actually a building there. So the retention of a building is in progress. The building is in progress. And by the time we get around, or LDC gets around to make a judgment of it, there will be a building there, admittedly. But again, as Jeff would say, he's jumped the gun and decided to do it anyway. I think, Jeff, am I right in saying that there was originally another application for a garden room which was rejected? Yes, thank you. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Meek. I mean, if you look on the map, on the planning application, it doesn't show a building there at all. So you're quite right, Councillor Meek. You know, there wasn't a building there in the first place. Jeff, do you want to pick up on anything?
I mean, I think Councillor Meek's, you know, said a lot of what needs to be said. The application makes no sense whatsoever, in that it relates to 3 Sherwood Road, but I think we can assume from the circumstances that by now that it is actually for the benefit of 10 Blatchington Hill, and so it makes no sense unless it's accompanied by an application to change to alter the curtilage of 10 Blatchington Hill to include the area of 3 Sherwood Road curtilage that he's built on, because circumstances suggest that it's going to be a pool house. It looks like a pool house, and it suggests that it will be a pool house for a pool which he intends to excavate at 10 Blatchington Hill. So it's crazy that he's still put it in for 3 Sherwood Road. We objected to the original plan for an outbuilding at 3 Sherwood Road, because by then we knew that 3 Sherwood Road was split into 3 flats, and the application didn't actually explain how the outbuilding would be used by the occupants of 3 Sherwood Road. Also, that it took up most of the rear garden of 3 Sherwood Road. Now we know that it looks like a pool house for the benefit of 10 Blatchington Hill. We can say, well, I think members, if they want to object to it, can say, well, it's clearly not for the benefit of 3 Sherwood Road. It's for the benefit of 10 Blatchington Hill. That if he wants to extend the curtilage of 10 Blatchington Hill into 3 Sherwood Road, then he should make a formal application. If he were to make a formal application, there'd clearly be an objection on planning grounds, because it takes away almost the entire rear amenity area for the three flats in 3 Sherwood Road, and just leaves them with a parking area at the front, which is obviously unsatisfactory in planning terms, because even if the property is split into flats, it still deserves to have its own curtilage and amenity area. And you know, just because it happens to be in the same ownership, it doesn't mean that the owner can just draw new boundary lines around the curtilages. The curtilages are fixed. They've been the same for years and years and years. And if you want to alter the curtilage of 2 neighbouring properties, you have to put an application in for change of use. If it's just a small strip of the neighbour's curtilage, and the neighbour agrees to losing that land, it's a small strip to enable you to have a parking area or something like that, then that could be acceptable. But in this case, it's like a sort of appropriation of land which should be with 3 Sherwood Road. So I think there's plenty of grounds, if you want to object on those points, that he's taken away the curtilage of 3 Sherwood Road, and that without bothering to put an application in for change of use to allow that to happen. And there's clear objections if he were to put an application in, because, as I say, it makes 3 Sherwood Road a sort of a poor standard property. It gives it just put a parking area at the front and nothing else for the residents to enjoy. They just sit out and, you know, enjoy the sunshine.
Okay. Councillor Meek?
Can I just back that up by saying that there's a couple in the ground floor flat who have a little girl of about 3 or 4, and they just come out onto the front car park area. She's got no place to play. So that absolutely backs up what Jeff just said.
Thank you. So, Councillor Borman?
Yeah, I'd like to propose then that we actually reject this application on the grounds that Jeff's just given us, basically. And
I can turn those into some grounds. Don't worry. If you agree with what I've said, you know, then I don't.
no, I do.
Good.
I do. They put the application in before, and we were worried about where it was going and objected to it. Well, now we can kind of see where it's going, and it's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because you've got a block of flats doesn't mean that they don't deserve a garden or a backyard or some form of outside area as well. And
Yeah. Okay.
Right, that's fine.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification on the actual outhouse, you know, the pool house, which we did talk about before, actually, on the previous application. But is that being knocked down or improved or enlarged, or what are they doing to it?
We're just starting to build it, I think. Yeah.
So what house was there already? There's something there. There's a bit of property there before, wasn't there? Or in the previous application when we talked about it?
He's just taken the boundary wall out, basically,
right.
and put in this application. And now it's half built, I think, and it obviously looks like a pool house. It's got its glass.
I mean, I think it's quite interesting on the application form asking what the proposed materials are, and they say not available, and yet they're building with them. Councillor Edson.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the block plans, and which show you the boundary between the two dwellings, and that doesn't change from the existing plan to the new plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to make a decision based on a lie, really.
Yeah, it's a fraudulent application.
It is, isn't it? I don't know. I suppose you couldn't see that.
Yeah, I've had a look at it.
Can you see that, folks? If I hold it nearer.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at. I must have it. And he's obviously a person that doesn't really care much about planning. What's the point?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm objecting to it.
Yeah, so I've got an objection from Councillor Borman. Does I have a seconder? Shall I get a seconder? Councillor Edson? And so can I have a show of hands of rejecting this application on the grounds discussed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's rejected unanimously, or objected to unanimously. Again, Councillor Meek didn't vote. I'll record that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
stop smiling, Councillor Meek.
It's wind.
Right. So we go on to planning applications received in week commencing the 12th July. LW/20/0436, Ones Off Wing Close. Demolition of existing single-storey rear extension, replacement with a single-storey rear and two-storey side extension, erection of entrance porch to the front elevation, and associated soft and hard landscaping. I open to the committee. Councillor Hanlon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, how it fits into neighbouring 29 Lexington Drive, I was worried at one stage, but when you look further into it, I don't have an issue with it. Thank you.
No, it's well away from the other properties. Yeah.
Mm.
Yes, yeah, because I think it butts up to a garage, doesn't it? Yeah. So is that a proposal, Councillor Honeyman? Any other comments? Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Foreman. And can I have a show of hands of supporting this application? And that's unanimous.
Thank
Thank
you.
LW stroke 20 stroke 0448 33 Sherwood Road, 2-storey rear extension. Open to the committee.
Yeah. As I mentioned on the agenda, this has been to appeal. We supported it in any event, but I think Councillor Honeyman did have concerns about the layout of the garage, and that is actually what led to the dismissal of the appeal, was solely the space in the front apron of the garage. I think it was a limited space, and so now the owner has put in an application simply for the extension, which the appeal inspector had no problem with.
Thank you. So, Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, because they've obviously now not doing the garage, I'd like to actually support this application.
Thank you. And does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Meek. And if there's no other comments, can I have a show of hands, please, of supporting this application?
Carried.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
LW stroke 20 stroke 0460 London Church Close, single-storey rear extension, 7.5 metres in length with eaves, a height of 2.8 metres and a maximum height of 3.2 metres. Any comments?
I made a point on the notes. Is this overdevelopment, Jeff?
Yes,
It's
the one what doubles in size, isn't it?
Yeah. 7.5 metre projection for a rear extension is a bit more than average, if you like. Most rear extensions sort of project about 3 or 4 metres.
Mm.
This projects right across the rear boundary of the property at right angles to it, not in the close, but in the other road. So it does intrude a bit on that, and it is a bit larger. Well, it doubles the size of the house, roughly, which is quite an enlargement on a limited plot.
There's no sort of information either regarding the appearance of the extension either. Only have the floor plans.
Mm.
Any more comments on this?
I'm not. I think
Councillor
I'll
Hunt,
object.
you put your hand up. What is it? Who would like to do a proposal? Councillor Meek.
I would just like to say I don't feel I quite know enough about this to be able to make a good judgment on it, apart from Jeff saying that it's really, you know, rather a large extension. I'm not experienced enough to know whether that's you know, allowable under these circumstances or not, or I'd prefer to take others' advice about that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Meek. Councillor Borman.
I think this is actually overdevelopment of the site because it is a very large extension and the site isn't a big site, and obviously it is in close proximity of other residents and houses surrounding it. So I actually propose that we object to it.
Okay, on the grounds of overdevelopment.
Overdevelopment.
Unneighbourly.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Edson. And if there's no other comments, can I have a show of hands, please, of rejecting this
1,
application?
2, 3, 4, 5.
Right. Those against?
That's
Councillor Everton, are you voting? Councillor Everton, are you voting for this application or no? Abstaining? Thank you. So that's carried.
carried. Thank you.
Sorry, my screen just completely froze and I don't know what just happened.
Okay. So we go on to LW stroke 20 stroke 0224 24 Hyde Crescent, ground and first floor side extension. Councillor Edson.
Yes, please, Chair. I made a note of this one. It looked like a separate dwelling. And I made a note, 0182, a support was given.
Yeah,
Which was obviously a previous.
I thought it was a bit familiar, but yeah, had it come up before?
Well, amongst my notes, I found that we'd given support to 0182
Oh.
earlier in the year. I'm just trying to find that now. When I'll come up with that in a minute. No,
I'll have a look at it.
I did some scribbling all over the blooming place on this one.
We had a 95 Hyde Crescent.
0182. I'm just looking for it now.
That's the only one I can find.
Yeah, that's 95.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 0182 is 95. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can I have any comments on this application of 20? Where are we?
24 Hyde Crescent.
Yeah. Anybody like to? Councillor Borman.
Yeah, I think this is an area where a lot of families want to live, and when they start extending their families, the majority of the properties, if they're not the flats, they're 2, possibly 3-bedroomed houses, and if they suddenly start having more children, they want to extend. This actual property has got the area to extend the property, and it's a great area, so I actually fully support this application, and I propose that we support it.
That find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Argent. And if no other comments, I'll take it to the vote of supporting this application. Have a show of hands, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's unanimous.
Thank you. That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. LW stroke 20 stroke 0377, The Briars, 93 Pearl Road. Erection of a 3-bedroom dwelling and garage in the rear garden. As you see, this is the it was a resubmission of application LW stroke 19 stroke 0740 earlier this year. Unless the committee is
we objected to the application last time, and the only change I can see is really in that they've given it a proper description. They've described it as a chalet bungalow before,
yeah.
and we actually pointed out that it was more like a an ordinary two-storey dwelling, and that's the way they've described it this time. Otherwise, there's no real change, and we rejected it before on grounds of it being in the green buffer, if you like, between the Firle Road properties and the newer properties beyond. It's out of character in an area of established character, and would leave a limited garden for the for 90. Well, it would have a limited garden itself, and leave the amenity area of 93 limited as well. So it's a sort of infilling or cramming in an area which doesn't really warrant that sort of development.
Yeah,
so,
referred to the neighbourhood plan on this one.
Yeah, it's an area of established character.
Yeah.
So, as I say, the only change is a slight change in the description to make it more accurate.
Okay. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, I was trying to look at the map and where it was specifically. Is this right next door to the South Downs National Park? Or is the South Downs National Park just a little bit further away? Because it's quite near the golf course and everything, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, it's where the newer development of Princess Drive and that area, and it comes out into Royal Drive and into Firle Road, and it's the property on the left-hand side as you come out of Royal Drive. So the entrance of the new dwelling will be actually in Royal Drive. But because the gardens on Firle Road are of a certain length, it sort of acts as a green buffer zone for Firle Road because of the character of that road.
I think it's the last property before the golf club.
Yeah. I think it's more or less opposite Belden House, isn't it? Not too far away.
Yeah. It's just before that bend.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can I have any comments, please?
We objected before. I see no reason why we shouldn't object again. It's the same application, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The same grounds.
Well, you know, I'm not changing my opinion.
Okay. So, sort of objecting on the grounds on the previous application. Yeah. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Borman. Any other comments? So can I have a show of hands of rejecting this application, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning applications received in the week commencing the 19th of July. LW/20/0353 15 Firle Range. Replacement of summer house at the rear. Is it a committee? A straightforward one. Councillor Borman?
Well, as far as I can see, this is a straight take one summer house down, replace it with exactly the same size, and it's at the rear of the property, and I don't see any reason why we can't support this application. So that's my proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Borman. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Meek. And no comments, then can I have a show of hands of supporting this application?
Thank you. That's carried.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Planning applications received the week commencing the 26th of July. LW/20/0468 5 Buckle Court Care Home, Marine Parade, change of use from nursing home to 6 residential flats. Councillor Edson.
Chair. Apparently, the reason why it was rejected before was the size of the rooms.
And parking.
Sorry?
And
the parking.
And parking, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got the same number of flats, but it looks like the furniture's been moved around, and there seems to be some walls moved, and storage space has been got rid of in some of it. So is that the way of? I don't know how they measure it. Do they measure on cubic capacity of a room?
They measure it on the floor area.
The floor area.
Mm. I mean,
so do you think that the applicant has taken that into consideration about the small, the size of the floor area, and made changes accordingly to get the application?
What's happened to amend the application is that in the report to the Lewis committee by the case officer, she referred to the fact that the sizes of the rooms were slightly below recommended space standards, even though Lewis, as opposed to Eastbourne, hadn't actually adopted those space standards as a policy. But she said that given the location on Seaford seafront and the amenity quality, if you like, the quality of the amenity of the location, it didn't really matter that some of the sizes of the units were slightly below the government's recommended space standards, and she didn't consider that justified a ground of refusal. Similarly with the parking spaces, she said that they're slightly under the minimum parking spaces air widths for that laid down by East Sussex County Council, but she said that there was room to make them slightly bigger in accordance with the standards, and that the number of parking spaces was okay because it complied with East Sussex's policy. But it was refused on the grounds of the sizes of the rooms and the inadequacy of the parking. The amendment is to alter the parking arrangements so that there are 6 spaces of the appropriate standard width, because there was room to do that, and that's what they've done. And the other thing is that previously the 4 2-bed units were described as being for 4 persons, which implied sort of 2 double bedrooms, but that instead they've now been described as 2-bedroom units for 3 persons. In other words, a double bedroom and a box room, or a single bedroom, which is more realistic given the sizes of the floor areas. So, as I say, it's very unusual for floor areas to be used as a sole reason for refusal, because there's not really enough strength in the grounds of to justify a refusal on that alone, especially where you've got a property like this in a sustainable location close to bus and train and shop, and with a very high amenity value. It's not as if it's in a sink estate or anything like that.
Yeah,
completely the opposite. And you've got to take into account the context of the location when you're looking at the if you're considering the sizes of the units. I've had a battle in a private case with the same case officer in a case in Eastbourne, where I had to reduce a 2-bed unit to a 1-bed unit to tie in with her concerns about the floor area. So I know that she's very insistent on this, but in this case she didn't even consider it to justify a ground of refusal, as I said, because of the location. So I didn't really think that the original decision was that strong. It couldn't really be supported on appeal, and I think these revisions that have taken place make it an even stronger application, if you like, and there's no justification for. I imagine it will receive recommendation to approve, as the last application did, and I can't see any grounds for refusing it.
No.
Councillor Mead.
I think we ought to approve it, because even if the room sizes are small and it's not kind of quite as big as you would want, you know, they look like they'd be very good starter homes for young families. And, you know, on that ground alone, I think if it allows people to get into the property market, stepping in, you know, at that level, that I think that's all to the good in Seaford.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That through you, Madam Chairman. That's the other point I wanted to make. It's a useful addition of 6 units to our housing allocation, if you like. We lost a few units in the housing allocation in the neighbourhood plan to Homefield Place. You recall that that application is coming up at the next meeting, and you rely on windfall applications like this to help you reach your allocation, and this is a pretty good example, you know, given its location, of useful additional housing units.
Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. For you, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Lord sort of put it in his application in the sense of, do they still intend this to be? I mean, you can put conditions on the type of clients you're going to buy, can't you? So is this going to be like an over 50s development or over 60s, or does it not really go to that? And I was also thinking, but if you're going to have one box room, could that be like a carer room, for example? I don't know, you know, for looking after an elderly couple. I don't know what the intent is, because of the historical side of this as being obviously a residential home, isn't it? So aimed at the elderly. Is this going to carry on being the same, or we're not quite sure? It doesn't really matter. It's not obvious, is it, at the moment? That's what I was trying to say.
There's change of use, you know, from a nursing home to a residential flat. So I presume
you can still put conditions in there, can't you, Chair?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah, you can for that aspect, but it's not, as far as you know, it's general. Any age group.
Yeah.
Yes, it's general.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So, Councillor Borman.
Yeah, I think obviously it got rejected last time because of the size of the properties. Though he's now changed from going from a 2-bedroom 4-person to actually more reasonable, and I think it will be accepted probably by Lewis at this amount. And we accepted it and supported it last time, so I think we should support it again this time.
Okay. Is that proposal?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hanneman. And can I have show of hands of supporting this application?
That's carried unanimously. Shall I point out that the revisions that have been made should deal with the you know, the grounds of refusal on the initial application that made by Lewis DC. Just to make it clear that we've looked at that decision and decided that you know, it's been revised, you know, properly to overcome the previous objections of Lewis DC. So, okay, so I'll add that to the.
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah. Okay.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we go on to Tree Works application TW/20/0057/TPO 20 Seaford Close, shortened 2 valves by 2-3 meters. And thank you, Jeff. We did get all the documents on this application after you requested them.
Got a little list.
Quite useful information. Any comments on this application?
No.
Councillor Edson?
Well, if the 3 people agree to it, I'm okay. You know, I think it's cutting down stuff over a neighbour's place.
Yeah, they're pretty minor works. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we usually find, don't they? We say, yeah, that's okay, and then along come the arborists and say, whoa, no, you can't do that. So, you're in there, as far as I'm concerned, that's okay.
Okay. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Borman. Any more comments? No? So can I have a show of hands for supporting this application, please?
Thank
That's
you.
unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 5, extension of the permitted development rights. Yeah.
Yes, this is just a description of these are the measures which the government have introduced really to stimulate building and everything after the slump, if you like, during the lockdown. Whereas the white paper that's been publicised today is really a separate matter. That was something which the government was part of their manifesto, I think, and what planning reforms which they always intended to introduce, and which have no connection to the lockdown and COVID-19. But these measures are more temporary measures in order to stimulate building and provide flexibility in response to the, as I say, the slump or the slowdown during the lockdown. So some of them only last for a few years. The youth classes issue is quite a good one. The youth classes haven't been shaken up like this for a long time, but and it's interesting to see, not so much from Seaford's point of view, but that village shops are sort of, there's an attempt to protect the use of village shops in there under the youth classes order and stop any shop being converted into a flat or whatever if it's if there's no similar shop within a certain distance. It's quite an ingenious way of the important issue of village shops. But as I say, that's not really that relevant to Seaford. That's just a point of general interest.
Bishopstone.
Oh yes, yeah.
But it's an example because it lost its village shop and post office back in the 60s, I think it was.
Yeah.
Late 50s. 60s.
Yeah, so there's examples all around the county. Otherwise, the problem with an earlier relaxation of permitted development rights to allow empty offices to be turned into residential flats was that it led, especially in big cities, to a lot of substandard housing because there wasn't any real requirement to make the things like insulation and separation of units that you wouldn't normally get in offices, but which is required if you're going to turn offices into residential units. And so there's been a lot of problems with that in big cities that tend to have more office blocks which are redundant. So that is a problem, but that's why it's been put forward as a temporary measure. Anyway, the measures are there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on them.
Any questions?
Oh, well.
Questions? Councillor Lee?
Do you think, I mean, you said it's not really, some of this isn't really relevant to Seaford. Do you think it might be relevant when we get shops closing down? And also there's I think there's quite a lot of space above shops in Seaford which could possibly be residential. And that might be very useful for, again, small flats that people could use as first-time buyer places, but also looking forward, how to revitalise our town centre, our High Street and Broad Street.
There has been quite a bit of that going on already. The thing is, we don't necessarily get to know about it because it doesn't require an application. I mean, for example, I think the area above Fox and Sons on the corner of Church Street, that was an office for Sussex HR. They had to move offices because it was being turned into residential flats under the previous permitted development relaxation. So yeah, there has been a bit of that going on, and I think there's some in Broad Street as well of you know, well, there was an additional story, I think, on an application for above a shop in Broad Street. So I think there has been, it has made a bit of a difference and brought more residential units into use in the town centre.
Councillor Hanneman?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for you, Chair. Do you think, Jeff? Do you think there'll be, you know, the LDC will be keeping like a register of changes of use of classes, so and then you could sort of disseminate it down to the Seaford area, which is obviously what we're interested in more. I don't know if that will happen. I'm not sure what they do at the moment, actually.
Yeah, I think it's important that there is a track kept of it, because for building regulation and housing, general housing purposes, you want to make sure that these properties were up to standard. But I don't know what the district council intend to do about it. I mean,
can you feed that back at all? Is that all right? Just to feed that for you, Chair. If Chair's happy, we're all happy. Just to feed that bit of request in a sense of just to say, is there a register of changes? Because as you say, we don't necessarily hear about it, do we?
A lot of the measures will require this application for prior approval, which should be logged by, we won't necessarily hear of those, but they should be logged by Lewis as applications, even if the application is looked on, if the application is looked on as okay, they won't respond to the application of prior approval, in which case it will go ahead. If there are concerns about traffic generation, other planning issues, then they will ask for a full application, and it will be dealt with in the normal way. So, but it would be nice to know, it would be nice if we were to be informed of applications for prior approval, just so that we know what's going on. We don't have a formal right of consultation there. I think neighbours do, but not other local authorities. But it would still be nice to, yes, ask them as a favour if they would let us know, because otherwise we're a bit in the dark, as we were about the previous relaxation, as I say. So yes, we could add that to any, I mean, really the report is simply for noting, but we could, if you agree, if members are agreeable, I'd be happy to go back to Lewis on that.
I mean, they could always say no, but I mean, it's going to be registered somewhere. There must be some sort of report going somewhere.
More likely to say yes than not to do it. But you know, we can only ask.
Okay.
All members happy for Jeff to do that for us? Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. So if there's no other comments, we'll just note the report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we move on to agenda item 6, update report of decisions made by Lewis.
Yes, I put Bibuckle Court on there.
Yeah.
And then right at the last minute, the fresh application arrived, and we slipped it onto the agenda. It was only notified to us a week ago. So Bibuckle, the previous decision on Bibuckle Court is on there, but it's sort of been overtaken by events, you know, by the new application that you've just considered.
Unless there's any comments, we note the report. Noted. Yeah, thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting tonight at 20:34.
20:34.